How is it that we can say that one part of the universe is unnatural, that the real world isn't lined up with the ideal world? It seems to me that if naturalism is true, that whatever is the case. As one football commentator put it, it is what it is. Yes, it is that way, but what should it be, or what ought it be, is an illusion if naturalism is true. When I was a kid, I used to like to watch the Nature Channel, and in the Nature Channel, you would always have a lion stalking a gazelle. And that lion would just slowly creep toward the gazelle, step by step by step. And they flash over to the gazelle, looking around, not really looking at anything. And all of a sudden, the lion would pounce, jump on the gazelle, rip its jugular out. Blood was splattering everywhere. I'd jump off the couch. Yeah, he got him. And nobody looked at that and said, that's murder. Lions eating gazelles, that's not murder. That's nature. Lions eat gazelles. Dolphins forcibly copulate with other dolphins, but they don't rape other dolphins. A race of ants could enslave a race of aphids, but nobody is protesting ant slavery. Why? Well, simply because in nature, that's the way that it is. When you think about this, humans live in a non-moral universe, which means we were the accidental pregnancy of energy acting upon matter plus time plus chance. Energy acting upon matter, that's not a moral process. Time and chance, those aren't moral properties. And yet somehow they produced a moral product like us. Okay, the same process that brought about your family members also brought about the fungus on your feet. So to put this really succinctly, how can a naturalist ever look at one part of the world and call it unnatural? Richard Dawkins, the new atheist, says this: the universe we observe has precisely the properties we should expect if there is, at bottom, no design, no purpose, no evil, and no good. Nothing but blind, pitiless indifference. DNA neither knows nor cares. DNA just is, and we dance to its music. Joel Marks, an atheistic professor of philosophy at the University of New Haven, he writes this: the whole crop of new atheists are softies of this kind. The religious fundamentalists are correct. Without God, there is no morality. But the Christians are incorrect, I still believe, about there being a God. Hence, I believe there is no morality. Do you see what he did there? He bit the existential bullet. He said, I know if there's no God, there's no such thing as morality. But rather than believing in God, I'm just going to deny morality. I'm going to deny that the Holocaust was evil, that slavery was wrong, that racism is an egregious moral sin. Well, he's being consistent. He's being consistent from a naturalistic worldview. J.L. Mackie, the atheistic philosopher, wrote that the presence of moral values, if they're objective, is strange given atheism. So he said this: if there really are objective values, they make the existence of a God more probable than it would have been without them. His solution? To deny objective moral values, that these are just emotions, these are just feelings, and nothing more. John Gray, another atheistic philosopher, he says, in the monotheistic faiths, God is the final guarantee in human life. Yet, human life has no more meaning than the life of a slime mold. When I said earlier, the same process that created the fungus on your feet also created your family members, that wasn't hyperbole. That is what atheistic thinkers are themselves arguing. Here's Alex Rosenberg. He's an atheistic philosopher out of Duke. He writes, what is the difference between right and wrong, good and bad? There is no moral difference between them. Why should I be moral? Because it makes you feel better than being immoral. So too, when we think about this, humans are clearly and obviously not equal. Now, by saying that, I'm not trying to be needlessly provocative. I'm just saying the obvious. It's clear that humans aren't equal. Now, I'll tell you what equal is. If I had $1 and you had 4 quarters, would that be equal? Sure. If I had $1 and you had 4 quarters, that would be equal. If I had a 6-pack of beer and you had 6 beers, if we were to trade, that would be equal, provided, I didn't have a craft beer and you didn't have a Natty Light, something like that. Equal, that would be equal. $1 for 4 quarters, a 6-pack for 6 beers. Okay, here's the question though. Are these 2 men equal? Are these 2 men equal? Clearly not. Clearly not. Stephen Hawking, who died in 2018, he had an IQ that was somewhere north of 200. 200. And LeBron James is 260 pounds, 6'9", just an incredible athletic specimen, and one of the greatest of all time, if not the greatest of all time. Now, should Stephen Hawking be allowed to try out for the NBA? Should LeBron James be able to publish papers in astrophysics journals? I hope you see where I'm going with this. Clearly, these 2 men are not equal. Some people will say, yes, but they're both human. Yes, they are both human. They're both human. But that's like saying that a Porsche and a Toyota Corolla are both cars. Yes, they're both cars, but they're not equal by any sense of the imagination or any stretch of the imagination. Other people will come back and say, yes, but these 2 men have things in common with each other. Yes, they're both human, and they both have things in common. They both have 2 arms, 2 legs, and 1 belly button. But having things in common does not make you equal. It just means that you have similarities, not that you're the same. This would be like saying that a Porsche and a Toyota Corolla both have 4 wheels and 1 transmission and 1 steering wheel. Just because they have things in common does not make them equal cars. The same thing is true here. One of these men is smarter, one of them is stronger. One of them has more of an education, one of them has more athleticism. You cannot, under any stretch of the imagination, say that they're equal. Now, at this point, are you saying that you're promoting inequality? Far from it. I'm saying I believe that these 2 men are equal. And you say, how do you figure? Well, in order for these 2 men to be equal, we would need at least 2 things. Something about them that is both objectively true and something that is truly important. Now, if the Christian worldview is true, this would mean that all human persons, regardless of size, strength, smarts, race, sex, age, wouldn't matter, all human persons are made in the image of God. And as a result, all human persons would have just an incredible, infinite value, to the point where Jesus Christ died for every man, woman, boy, and girl on planet Earth. That would be something that is objectively true and truly important. The fact that these men both have a pair of kidneys, that's objectively true, but it's not truly important. The same is true when it comes to other features that they have. Their skin color, their height, those things are true, but they're not truly important in the sense of equality. What we need is something that's objectively true and truly important, and this is precisely what we have when it comes to the Christian worldview. That the Apostle Paul can say in Galatians 3:28, that there is neither Jew nor Greek, male nor female, slave nor free, but we are all one in Christ Jesus. This is the great equalizer. Classism, sexism, and ethnicity, racism, all of these things are leveled at the cross of Christ because God exists. However, if you don't believe in any kind of a transcendent source from which we can get universal human rights, then you're left with clear inequalities. Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century atheistic philosopher, said another Christian concept has been passed even more deeply into the tissue of modernity. the concept of the equality of souls before God. This concept furnishes the prototype of all theories of equal rights. Do you see what he's saying here? He's saying that this idea of equality, from where does it originate? Christianity, that's where. Richard Rorty, the atheistic philosopher, is very blunt when he writes this. This Jewish and Christian element in our postmodern, atheistic, pragmatic tradition, and he's of course referring to equality, this tradition or element in our tradition, is gratefully invoked by freeloading atheists like myself. So, how does Richard Rorty affirm equality of all human persons? He says that he borrows this, I would say, steals it from the Christian worldview. You get this from the Bible, that we have something that's both objectively true and truly important. Well, finally, human beings are not morally unique. Human beings are not morally unique. You know, what is it that makes Homo sapiens more morally valuable than any other species that exists? You know, we might say that Homo sapiens have physical differences. True. You know, I do like the opposable thumb. I like that we're able to stand and walk upright. We can operate a remote control. There's a lot of things that we can do. But these physical differences, they're not meaningful. It doesn't make us morally unique that we have certain physical properties. Other people will say, well, we have intelligence. We're able to reason and we're able to think. True, that's true. We're able to think. But what is it about having intelligence that makes you more valuable? You know, let's think about physical properties. If someone's bigger, does that make them more valuable than someone that is smaller? You know, is Shaquille O'Neal more valuable than someone that is a newborn baby or a toddler? What about intelligence? Is someone who is a Stephen Hawking more intrinsically valuable than someone who is a Forrest Gump, for example? What about the idea of sentience? The idea that you're able to have higher order thinking and self-reflection. This is the notion of consciousness. And I know sentience could be defined in 8 different ways, but just think that you're able to have rational thoughts and self-reflection. Well, I don't see how this would give us moral value. This gives us a certain utility. Like if you're big, you're strong, you're smart, you're fast, you're able to think, that would give you utility. But that wouldn't give you morality. If you think about this, especially, what would happen if we took away one or more of any of these different properties? Like, what if we took away a human being's physical properties? What if they were a quadriplegic? Or what if they were massively scarred and they had different physical properties? Or what if they had a brain injury and they lost much of their intelligence? Would they lose their moral value? What if they were in a coma and they lost sentience? What if they were too young? What if they were a newborn and they don't have sentience yet? Does that mean a newborn baby loses moral value? See, each one of these properties of humans is simply arbitrary. And if we took them away, then we would be taking away not just a physical property, we would be taking away their moral worth. Peter Singer writes this. Now, this is an atheistic bioethicist. He's a Princetonian. I'm not quoting to you from atheistic websites here. Singer writes this. Humans who bestow superior value on the lives of all human beings solely because they are members of our species are judging along lines strikingly similar to those used by white racists who bestow superior value on the lives of other whites, merely because they are members of their own race. Do you see his point? You know, racism is what? Racism is the unjustified raising of one race above another. And sexism is the unjustified raising of one race above another. He's saying here that we're guilty of what's called speciesism, the unjustified raising of one species over another. Why is it that the human species has moral value over other material, biological species? He continues, why should we believe that the mere fact that a being is a member of the species Homo sapiens endows its life with some unique, almost infinite value. And then in his textbook on ethics, he writes this on page 122. Human babies are not born self-aware or capable of grasping that they exist over time. They are not persons. Do you see what he did there? He just separated being a human being from being a human person. Human being versus human doing. So because human babies lack sentience or intelligence or whatever, certain physical properties, what results from this? He says the life of a newborn is of less value than the life of a pig, a dog, or a chimpanzee. Richard Carrier echoes this when he says a human baby has more value than any animal on earth, with the possible exception of adult apes or dolphins or perhaps elephants. Do you see where this leads? Now, this isn't, how should I put this? This isn't an inappropriate logical conclusion. Now, this seems very logical to me, that if all we are just molecules and matter and motion, and all of us are just chemicals and juices and DNA, why should we look at one sack of DNA and say that that sack is valuable, whereas another sack of DNA is not as valuable or even invaluable?